For our next speaker, we have General Keith Alexander, Commander of U.S. Cyber Command, the Director of the National Security Agency, and the Chief of Central Security Service. As the Commander of Cyber Command, he is responsible for planning, coordinating, and conducting operations and defense of the Department of Defense's computer networks as directed by U.S. STRATCOM. As the Director of NSA and Chief of CSS, he is responsible for a Department of Defense agency with national foreign intelligence, combat support, and U.S. national security information system protection responsibilities. General Alexander entered active duty at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. Previous assignments include the Deputy Chief of Staff, the Department of the Army, Commanding General of the U.S. Army Intelligence and Security Command, Director of Intelligence, U.S. CENTCOM, and Deputy Director for Requirements, Capabilities, Assessments, and Doctrine for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. General, thank you for giving a keynote here today.
Well, I'm certainly glad you left the dates off of some of those. I entered West Point, I think it was 1995. So those of you who are math got that one. I had an hour and 40 minutes to talk as part of that keynote, and they cut that. No, I'm just kidding. They cut that down. There are a few things that I'd like to talk about on a serious note first. This is supposed to be on cyber, but I recognize that we can't talk cyber. We won't get into that topic unless we hit some of the stuff on media and media leaks. And I know Senator Whitehouse was here a little bit earlier, and there were some questions back and forth. I wanted to give you some thoughts from my perspective because what's going on in media leaks directly impacts our ability to get cyber legislation. And we have to address both as a nation and amongst nations. We've got to get this right. So let me start out with what's happened on all of the media leaks and what we've seen from the President's Review Group, the President's speech, and I would add in what we saw from the United Kingdom when they looked at the Miranda Greenwald issue and what the justices there found. With respect to the review group and the President, one of the things that has come through from my perspective is NSA is doing what we asked it to do. It's collecting the information, it's working with the courts, Congress, and the administration, and when it makes a mistake, it self-reports. What the review group found, and it was interesting having them come up to NSA, is that our people were acting with noble intent, trying to do a very difficult job and doing it very well. The question is, are we asking them to do the right thing? That's a policy decision. We can come and talk about that in a few minutes. But from my perspective, and I'm glad that we have Chris Inglis here. He was the deputy director for 7 years with me. The one thing that we would ask ourselves as every leak would come out is, are we doing the right thing? Have we done the right thing? And are we doing what the nation needs us to do? And the answer is, this is what the country has asked us to do to stop terrorism, to collect intelligence for our national interests. And in every case, we're doing what the courts, Congress, and the administration have asked us to do. It's interesting to see the amount of oversight that we get. I should have realized as a young kid I was going to run into this level of oversight. I used to spend a lot of time in the hallway in elementary school as a guest all by myself. And now when we look at the oversight that NSA has in running these programs, we find out that we have oversight from our Inspector General and General Counsel, from the DNI's Inspector General and General Counsel, from DOD's Inspector General and General Counsel, from the Department of Justice, from the White House, from Congress, and from the courts. Everybody looks at what we do to ensure that we're doing what we've been asked to do, we're doing it right. Interestingly, almost every mistake that we've made has been self-reported by NSA. We took an oath to do that, and we do that extremely well. No matter what the consequences, if we make a mistake, we took it to the court. And I think what the courts have found is this is a tough technical area, and that we were trying to do the right thing. I think if you read through all the court studies on that, you'll see that that is in fact true. So where does that lead us? Well, we're now in an interesting situation as a nation, and I think recently what came out with the justices in the United Kingdom, they looked at what happened on Miranda and other things, and they said, it's interesting. Journalists have no standing when it comes to national security issues. They don't know how to weigh the fact of what they're giving out and saying, is it in the nation's interest to divulge this? And I just put that on the table because that's a key issue that we as a nation are going to face. My personal perspective, these leaks have caused grave, significant, and irreversible damage to our nation and to our allies. And it will take us years to recover from it. In some areas, like terrorism, I feel that others are going to pay the price for what's done. We've got to come up with a way of fixing that. What the review group and the president has said is, let's see what we can do on the business record FISA, and we're going to work through that over the next few weeks with meetings at the White House even today on that topic. So as I mentioned, and I saw that you had on this panel here just ahead of me, what are the issues that we face in cyberspace, and what does this mean? And why do we need cyber legislation? And what are these two, and how do they come together? Well, from my perspective, NSA has great insights, as does Cyber Command, to threats against our nation. Wall Street, the power companies, the rest of government don't have a way to protect themselves without us working together with them. An attack on Wall Street or an exploit going against Wall Street, NSA and Cyber Command would probably not see that. We have no capability there. Against everything that's been said, the fact is we don't have the ability to see it. And the internet service providers and others are forbidden from sharing that information with us, with the government, DHS, FBI, NSA, and Cyber Command because of the Electronic Communications Privacy Act and the Stored Communications Act. I checked with Linda Brandt, Vito, just ahead to make sure I got that all right. So we have an issue. We have capabilities to help defend the nation, but we don't have a way of sharing them back and forth. And if we did share something, we're going to have to figure out how to work liability with those companies so that they're protected from the facts that we've given them. So that gets us into the cyber issues, and I want to hit a few key things. First, I came in just as the question or the thoughts on Estonia came up. Look at May 2007, what happened in Estonia, the first distributed denial of service attack that was public against a nation state. Huge consequences. Estonia has really stepped up and done some tremendous things there. Look what happened in 2008 against Georgia. And now more recently, look at all the attacks that have gone on and the exploits. I'm gonna divide these into two groups. Exploits are where people go in to steal information, whether it's secrets or theft of your identity to steal money. And attacks are where they're going to disrupt or destroy your networks. So I'll divide those two like that. We've seen a number of distributed denial of service attacks against Wall Street over the last 18 months, over 300. We saw Rasgas and Saudi Aramco hit with a destructive malware that wiped the data off over 30,000 systems, and we saw that again in South Korea twice, May and June of 2013. Caused over $180 million in damage to those systems in South Korea. It's huge. There's a lot going on in this area, and there is a great need for our nation to get cyber legislation and work with other nations and set up what are the norms, what are the red lines, and where are we going to go in the future. We have to address that as a nation. And I think one of the things that we're getting out of the media leaks is we've got to have a public discussion on what it is that government can and should do. I'm going to cover 5 key things that I think we first need to do and what we're working on at U.S. Cyber Command. First, we need a defensible architecture. Much of the data that we have out there is in networks that are legacy networks that are very difficult to protect. People have to make everything right to address it. One mistake and an adversary can get in. And so right now, the architectures are in the favor of those who are trying to exploit and attack. We need an architecture, from my perspective, that's a thin virtual cloud architecture where it turns that and helps put the advantage back to the defenders, those who are trying to defend those networks. And from my perspective, also putting in a capability to see what's going on and to address, to fix vulnerabilities at network speed is key to fixing this. And so that's the first part. We need a defensible architecture. Being here at Georgetown, I should have probably put two first, and that is trained and ready people. One of the things for the universities and the folks that are coming up, this is a great area. You should come to Cyber Command and NSA. I know this isn't a paid political announcement, but just put that on the table. And why do I say that? In the midst of all of this controversy, it's my opinion, it's a great place to work. Great people doing what our nation has asked them to do. But more importantly, they get to see both sides, the unclassified and the classified side. And I would recommend to any government service for some period of time so you can see how our nation's government works and where it's going. Now, with respect to trained and ready forces, education is key to that. And I know we've got some great talent here in the audience, and those of you, many of you, have taken a lot of these courses. What we're doing is we're training everyone to a new standard, a high standard. The same standard that NSA would train its top elite forces at, Cyber Command is doing the same thing. We looked at the number of training courses, seats that we needed for the 2,000 people coming in. It was over 4,500 seats for just the small group that's coming right now. Think of that, 4,500 different training seats, different classes. Think of this as the SANS Institute, but all different versions of the training that you have. Our nation needs a trained and ready force. In Cyber Command, we have to train them beyond that. They need to know what are the limits of their authorities. How do they do this? How do we work together with NSA, with FBI, with DHS as one team? Operational concepts and command and control are one of the things, the third thing that we're working. And when I bring up command and control, some of the issues that we put on the table is how do you control all these teams that are operating there as a single entity? This is a new command and control construct where we're now talking about virtual and physical command and control. And how do we streamline that command and control from the President and the Secretary to Cyber Command and others? We're working both of those. Shared situational awareness. You know, it's interesting. That number 4 issue, if you get 10 different people together and you say, draw me a picture of what you say happened in cyberspace, so that the chairman, the president, the secretary, or the general can understand what's going on. Draw me a picture. When you say they got into the network, can you draw me a picture of what that looks like? And then how would you have defended against that? And what were the key parameters, the key variables that we should have in that picture so that the commander and others can understand exactly what you're facing and what you do to deny the adversary that capability. And it's interesting. You know, the more technical you get, the more you get the system routers, you get these flow things, you got computer chips, and you put all this stuff. But how do you visualize cyberspace? From my perspective, if you can't visualize and transfer that thought to someone else, we won't have a common way of stopping it. For the cyber forces, we have to have that picture. So we're building a common operational picture. I think we're making headway in that. Finally, authorities. Up front, this is a team sport. It's not just NSA and Cyber Command, but it's also DHS, FBI, and many others. And government has to work with industry. We have to have the red lines, the policies. We're working our way through the policies, but the key thing that we need is legislation. We need legislation to address what I started out with, the Electronic Communications Protection Act and the Stored Communications Act, we need a way of addressing that. Here's why. NSA and Cyber Command, FBI and others may know something about an adversary's ability to exploit or attack a network. If it's classified, how do we share that? And if we share that, how do they give us that information back? So if we were trying to protect Wall Street as a nation, how do we get the information on signatures? This isn't our privacy information. This is attack information or exploitation information. We don't need the contents of emails. We need to know what type of exploitation is being used, where is it coming from, and where is it going to. And it should be shared across government so that DHS, FBI, NSA, and Cyber Command can all work together on that issue. I think that's what we need in cyber legislation. I recognize that we've got to handle the media leaks first. I think we are going to make headway over the next few weeks on media leaks. I am an optimist. I think if we make the right steps in the media leaks legislation, then cyber legislation will be a lot easier. Last week we had a hearing at the Senate Armed Services Committee, and this was one of the key issues the senators honed in on: threats to our country in cyberspace. They're growing. We're being attacked more. It's clear that we have vulnerabilities, and many are saying this could be the next Pearl Harbor. There's a lot we need to do between government and industry and within our government to get this right. I think we have some tremendous capabilities in our government that we ought to share, analogous to the way we share capabilities to defend our nation in physical space. If a bank is attacked by another nation state, our country shouldn't say to that bank, good luck with that. Because if that bank were attacked in physical space with missiles, we wouldn't say, well, you have to have your own missile defense system. And so in this space, we've got to figure out how that government-industry partnership works. And finally, and perhaps as important as some of the others, we've got to come up with a way for our government and other nations to work together in this space, set up the norms and the red lines so everybody understands what they are and how we'll act. So with that, let me open it up to questions. No questions, I'm out of here.
Hi, I'm Spencer Ackerman with The Guardian. Thanks for doing this. Can you comment at all on whether NSA was able to detect the invasion and occupation of Ukraine? It seemed to take policymakers by surprise. And
I'm so sorry. The Q&A is only for audience members, not for press. So if audience would like to ask questions, that would be great. Thank you. Sorry.
I don't know, NSA used to have a policy post-Watergate, more or less looky, no touchy, listen, no tell. You just listen to everything. That did not feed back into domestic politics. But post-2001, the government began to require NSA wiretap data to be fed back into domestic politics, like at DEA, Special Operations Divisions, and this was covered up with parallel reconstruction, et cetera. Is not the solution to some of this let NSA do what they've always done well and put the firewall to keep this data from coming back into domestic politics? Would that not solve a lot of these problems?
Well, I've only been at NSA 8.5 years. I've not seen that going back to politics at all, period. So I question your facts up front. I do think there is an issue of what NSA's responsibility is, and I think you raised that second point, though, is a good point. We're a foreign intelligence agency. What we know really well is what the terrorists are doing outside the United States. Our job is to work with the FBI and say, we see one trying to come into the United States. And the issue becomes, how do we take the information that we know about terrorists, their communications, and their way they act, and work with the FBI? And the thought was, based on the MIDAR example from 2001, was to set up something like the business record FISA and have a way for us to look through the data, find those things that are of concern, and then pass that to the FBI for their act. recognize that in that data, there is no other information other than the to from number, the date, time group, and the duration of the call. That's all our analysts get to look at. I think that was a good starting point. The question is, can we do better? That's what the President has challenged us to do. And I think the answer is, yes, we can. So we're going to work that, and I think over the next couple of weeks that will come out, and that will address your second point even more. Thanks.
Sir, I'm Greg Collins. I'm part of the Security Studies program here at Georgetown. I'm also part of the ROTC program here as well. My question is regarding the integration of Guard and Reserve units with active duty Cyber Command, and how you characterize the integration going forward.
I think, one, we need the Guard and the Reserve in Cyber Command, and we're pushing that. We're working that closely with General Grass and General Jacoby to make sure that we set it right. The only thing that I put on the table is that they have to be formed in the same type teams as we're forming for the active side and meet the same training standards. There's actually a benefit from having the Guard and Reserve here. Many of the people in the Guard and Reserve are IT professionals who are really good in this area. We benefit by having them as part of the team. So I think that's a great area. I think you'll see that grow. We have a Cyber Guard exercise every year. This summer we'll have another one that will work with all the Guard and Reserve units, work across all the states and with the rest of the government. So if you get a chance, I would volunteer to get into that program and watch how that's going on. It'll kind of give you some insights for a future in the reserves.
Thank you, sir.
Hannah Lynn, British Government. One of the themes we've seen emerge in the media debate at home is that the, I think, oversimplified misconception that metadata or bulk data is the same thing as mass surveillance. I think this is really unhelpful for the progress of cybersecurity. Is that something you've seen here, and how can we help to mature that debate so that the public can make an informed view on this issue?
Oh, that's a great question, thank you. Because the issue really gets to the point of how do you track a terrorist coming into your country with the least intrusive measure. And that was the way we came up with the Business Record FISA program. The least intrusive measure was don't try to capture everybody's communications and read, I'm making a bomb and going to blow up something in America. Rather, it was see if we can get the nexus between terrorist activities, and with that, pass that to the FBI for them to do, through the legal process, anything further that needs to be done. And so it is a great point, and I think it is a starting point. You've seen in a number of the judges, 15 plus have agreed that this is constitutional. Now, there are some that haven't, and that's a debate that will have to go on in the legal parts. I'm not a lawyer. But having said that, what we've gotten from the FISA courts and from Congress is that metadata was the best starting point. I do think there are things that we can do to make it better and to ensure our civil liberties and privacies and share that with other countries. So I think we're going to make great progress in this area, but I'll tell you the one thing that would concern me. You have to have some tools. If we take away the tools from our analysts, we're not going to be able to do our job. So thanks, that is a great question. Thank you.
Yeah. Sir, I'm Peiran Wang from Free University of Brussels, Belgium. My question is, the existing international non-proliferation regime has not effective measures on the international transfer on the cyber security, whether technology or the materials. And if some country got the related technology or the architecture, launched the cyber attack against the United States or the other countries, what's the responses to such a cyber attack, and how to establish the non-proliferation regime against such such technology transfer? Thank you.
Thanks. I'm going to answer this. I think I got the gist of your question, which is, with all the cyber attack tools that are out there, what's the controls and limits, and how do we do that? That's the first thing. And then how do countries work together to set up the norms for how we're going to operate in this space? I think I would start with the second first. We do have to have a set of norms of what is the appropriate actions by countries in cyberspace, and how do we stop those? And it gets right to the heart of your first question. Let's say that there is a wiper virus out there that was used against Saudi Aramco. It makes sense that everybody gets those signatures and protects their networks against just such a virus from coming in. But the reality is it's much more complicated. As you know, you can have encrypted VPN and other communications going into and out of your network that an adversary has gotten. Protecting your network now is much more difficult, so that it may be that the way someone got in was not visible to anybody, and once you encrypt, nobody's going to see the data because the firewalls and other things perhaps aren't looking for it. Bottom line, I think we do have to have norms established. We have to work with other countries on what you can and shouldn't do, and then what are the responses? What do you do? There's a great section in the President's cyber speech in May of 2009 that says, we'll react to cyber attacks on this country like we would through cyber or any other of our means, including diplomatic, economic, and other available force. So that's a policy decision of how we do it. I do think this is where countries need to get together and say, so what are we going to do? Finally, I just give you a shout out. There is some great capabilities that are out there that's free, that takes off of some of the software that Google and others have made that NSA put into a cloud called Accumulo. It's freeware. Look at it. I would look at that as an architecture to begin to develop a defensible architecture for any activity you have. Thank you.
Hello, Michael Best. Michael Best. First of all, thank you for being here, General, and for all your service over the years. My question is about determining the responses to cyber attacks against the United States and its infrastructure, and specifically, what kind of criteria do you think we need to put into place to distinguish between types of cyber attacks in terms of both severity, the person or persons behind it? As it stands, we have very clear rules and regulations about what consists of a war, what consists of an armed conflict, and how to respond. But so far, the classification of cyber attacks remains relatively murky, although we've made a lot of great progress in the last 10 years. So I'm curious what you think the next steps might be in building a cyber attack classification system.
I'm not sure that you would ever want to get into a hard, fixed response attack system that says if A happens, we do B. I think you will always want the policymakers to have flexibility in how they respond. So the first step would be we have to have a defensible architecture to defend and ensure the resiliency of our architectures. I think we can do that. We have to work with industry to make sure that they're protected in the same way and that we can share back and forth. And we have to give our cyber forces, FBI, DHS, NSA, Cyber Command, all working together, the authorities to defend that, and I think we've worked towards that. The issue comes down to what happens if it takes more. That is going to be a policy decision. Just like if an armed group were to attack one of our cities, we would look at it, is this a nation-state sponsored? If it was a motorized rifle regiment, we would probably approach it differently than if it was terrorists. And so I think it's the same thing in cyberspace. At the heart of your question, though, is one of the really tough things, attribution at network speed. Who's doing it and why are they doing it? So that goes back to having a good picture of what's going on there in cyberspace and how you come back to that. And I think we need that. I think it will be for a while murky. Who did it? Why are they doing it? What's the appropriate response? And I don't believe we'll be at the place where we could respond at network speed necessarily against the adversary, especially if they cover their tracks, until you find out who's doing it and why they're doing it. So I think all of that, what it would be my recommendation is that we take all those facts to the policymakers, lay out the response options that we have, and then they would choose how, when, if, where we'd respond. And I think that's really what the nation wants. There are things you can do on your network and in your systems that you should do totally within that domain to prevent certain things from happening. I think all of that's good. We ought to take that to another level. Great question. Thank you. I think I'm out of time, right? Out of slits.
Thank you, General.
Thank you.
Thank you.